Welcome back to Rooted in the Caribbean, our Women in Leadership series. Today, my guest is Audra Mitchell. Audra, I would say, has a multi-hyphenated HR executive, and she's currently the Executive Director and Chief Development Officer of Awesome Consulting Limited. Audra's focus in this new phase of her journey is on a number of C's: church, community, corporate social responsibility, impact, and corporate integrating. Audra has over 26 years HR experience in diverse sectors in both unionized and non-unionized environments. She's an accomplished human resource executive, learning and development leader, HR and industrial relations advocate, organizational development guru, team intervention specialist, and team leadership and people management expert. Audra has worked in a number of sectors, including banking, manufacturing, retail, and corporate. She has been passionate over the years about empowering individual and organizational growth, and has pivoted into specializing in learning and development for the past 13 years. Audra has driven key HR initiatives regionally across the Caribbean and internationally, and worked with the Masigana Group for over 5 years. Certified in ProSci Change Management and the transformational program Listen Like a Leader from the Barry Wehmiller University, St. Louis, Missouri. She's also a member of the global organization Association of Talent Development and HERMAT. Her expertise spans coaching, mentoring, and mediation, as well as program design and delivery. I am so honored to call Audra, among other things, a really great friend and a wonderful advocate for women's leadership and development. She has strategically established in 2019 the Massey Learning Institute, and before stepping away into her own consultancy, which she does in conjunction with her husband, she continued to impactfully work with young adults learning to transition into the world of leadership. She is a mentor for the AmCham Women in Leadership 2025 program and has also provided mentorship for many years through the Arthur Lockjack Global School of Business, where she is an alumni member. Please welcome Audra. Welcome to Rooted in the Caribbean, our Women in Leadership series, and today my guest is Audra Mitchell. Audra, an amazing woman and a really dear friend of mine. We have known each other. We're talking at least more than a decade now, so it's been a while. And I am so excited to have this conversation with Audra today. So Audra, welcome.
Thank you, Dominique, and thank you for the privilege of being here on this platform with you and having this conversation.
I must say, you look majestic. I mean, not that there's ever a day that I've ever seen Audra that she doesn't look amazing, but today she looks particularly majestic. So
Thank you, Dom. I had to prepare for this. This is an important platform, and I wanted to make sure, that I brought all of me to you this morning.
Thank you so much. So, Audra, the question I ask all guests: tell us about your roots. What are your roots?
All right, so it's a very interesting question, right? So for me, born, raised in Trinidad and Tobago, but I was actually adopted as a baby and adopted by Trinidadians, Caucasians from Portuguese background, right?
Right.
So they knew my mom and they adopted me. So a lot of my upbringing was shaped by my parents, and I actually refer to them as my parents. We never really used the word adopted. And what for me was so important, I tell people the who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I've learned really was shaped by them because my biological mother had gone away and she wasn't in the picture. She might communicate from time to time, but it was really them. Grew up in a predominantly Caucasian neighborhood, and when private schools and that sort of thing. But why I'm saying that is that my parents understood me and what I needed. So there
Right.
were no color lines or anything like that in my experience. But for my mom, one of the things that she said that continued to stay with me, and she told me from very young, she said, listen, you're black and you're a woman, so your education is key,
Yes.
So a lot of what they did was to pour into me through my education. I had a strong Catholic upbringing. I still hold on to that. My spirituality is very important. A value system, my upbringing, they taught me a lot about the importance of my name and having integrity and not doing anything to ever compromise my name.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that's very much related to it was through the example of my dad. So picture this, my dad, tall, fair, blonde hair, blue eyes, but very generous. So we had a lot of fruit trees in the yard, and I was always with him. I was his child. You saw him, you saw me. I was always in his shadow. And what I saw from him was that every day he would go out in the yard and collect bags of mangoes and avocados, things that people would take to sell. And he would wait, and when the garbage collectors came, he would give it to them, and anybody came, it didn't matter who it was. So a lot of my upbringing was also in recognizing and appreciating people, seeing people for who they were and who they are, not in terms of status in society. So that's it, and while, I did have friends from all ethnicities as well, so best friends from different ethnicities. And so that also gave me an appreciation of the diversity and the beauty, really appreciating the beauty of our country and the value it brings.
And hearing you talk about it just makes me recognize how what you're describing is your upbringing was rooted in love. If because that was a choice, when you adopt someone who doesn't look like you make a choice just to love this person. And wow, it sounds like you had a phenomenal relationship with them.
Yeah, very much so. I always tell people that if it wasn't for the difference in color, you really couldn't tell, so, and
Wow.
times I was naughty, yeah, I got disciplined like everybody else did, but I didn't feel a difference,
Yeah.
and it really shaped a lot of me, and what I valued and how I saw people and how I interacted with people. So I'm really grateful for that.
How you're bringing your roots, how have you been able to translate that into your leadership journey?
So, great question. So, because my roles, I'm an HR professional and from 2012 onwards specialize in learning and development. So, I meet people from all walks of life. So, I've been HR in banking, I've been HR in retail and leadership roles. And then because of my HR work, interfacing with people from the States and Colombia and the Caribbean region, would say that because of this appreciation from a child in terms of valuing people and making people feel seen,
Yes.
that I carried into my leadership. So when somebody came in front of me and I had to deal with a matter, and going back to my mom speaking to me about the importance of a name and having integrity, that's how I try my best to lead my life. And that's why I lead my life, guided by my value system. So if I'm leading others, what I'm dealing with a situation, it has to be guided with getting to the truth of it, being fair, being objective, being authentic.
Yeah.
And I would also say as well, confidentiality is a key thing for me.
Yeah.
And I guess I link that right back to that my name and how do I show up. And I would say, Dominique, it's not from a place of ego, but it's really from a place of just valuing other people and making people feel valued, especially when it's a difficult situation. So, yes, there's a situation we have to deal with. It may be a difficult situation, but I always wanted people to feel seen and heard and felt that the process was fair.
Yeah.
And I tie all that back to my spirituality, my value system, my upbringing.
Yeah. And I can attest to that. Like, I have had so many interactions with you where you were so comfortable taking the back seat and allowing others to shine. And whether that that would have been people on your team, people on other teams, but you were, the way I would describe you is like you very much build a platform and you just allow others to climb onto that platform and you lift them up. Like that's been my experience of you. So that value system and knowing, understanding where it came from. Wow, I'm in awe.
Oh, thank you for that. And I would say as well too, part of me was I was always very shy as well.
Right.
So I never ever liked the forefront. But again, I've had the experience as a child. I remember as a grown up, my neighbor told me that when she looked at me, she'd see me playing with her niece and the neighbor's children and that sort of thing. And she had said apparently to somebody, that child is going to grow up to be a leader. So I never knew that, right?
Yeah.
And every experience in my career, to your point, I would be in the background because I was like, I can be in the background, let me support, I'm there, you have my 100% commitment. But interestingly, as I reflected, every job, so I worked in 3 companies. I worked at RBTT, I worked at Caribglass, and then Massey, and then now doing my consultancy, right? And as I reflected, I realized that in those organizations, they saw my potential and therefore they pushed me forward.
Yeah.
So I would say to what you said, part of it was because I feel it's important to create a space where people could be their greatest and we could be a catalyst or a channel through which that happens. So I definitely didn't mind the background, but also being very shy and therefore having the organization see me and then push me forward and say, you can do this, even when I myself might have doubted it.
And how did you build that confidence? Because I know if you start talking about a topic that you are passionate about, no one would know that you're shy.
Yes.
So what have you done? What are the tools that you've used to equip you to be able to train other people to come out of that kind of comfort zone?
Yeah, so good question. So if I even go back to RBTT, so one of the roles that I had to do was that when persons at a leadership level were recruited, you start to do the assessment, right, for them. The 360, they would, I used to administer it on behalf of the bank, all levels, senior levels. So part of that was going back to the confidentiality. So they realized, okay, we know that whatever you say, you'll keep it confidential. So part of it was that one, to be honest, was that the company would keep putting me in those positions, and I would say, "You sure? I don't know if you're ready." And they would say, "Yes, you're ready," right? So there's the part of it where others see you, they believe in you, and even when you're uncomfortable, they gently push,
And create a safe space.
and create a safe space. The other part of it was, I've had the privilege of many amazing female leaders who also saw me and would encourage me, and say, listen, I've seen you do this, you're really good at this, or may even show me these things that I may not necessarily see in myself that they see. So their encouragement and support, and these are leaders that are, very influential, very senior in their game, very successful. And as well, I've also had the privilege of the organization investing in me with a coach. All right. So I had again a coach that would encourage me, and have me really reflect on, what it is that makes you think you can't do this, right? And again, creating that safe space. I would also say to persons, I love to read. I do a lot of reading because I believe that as a leader, or even as a person, one of the ways to grow is through reading and learning. So I'm always reading something, I'm always researching. And the last thing I would say is that I've been privileged that what I do is my passion. So when I go in front now, so for instance, even at the times back then when I was shy to facilitate, there's something that will happen because from the time there's all the anxiety before. But as I step in front of the class and then I start to do this thing, and I would call it, I would say it's God's gifting and what He's led me to. Something, I'd almost say like a switch turns on, and all the fear and anxiety goes, and it dissipates and I just go into a zone and then I feed off of the energy of the participants. I see how people are reacting. So I would say it's a combination of those things, I really reflect on it. And even after to now I've been facilitating for a long time and I do these sessions and I still, so let me put it this way. I could have facilitated a program 10 times. All of the 10 times I would take it, I would review it, I would look at it, I would pray and say, God, okay, tell me what you want me to change because it's a different audience. And I would change it and add in new content because the world is changing rapidly.
Yeah.
So therefore,
So you recognize that you can't just sit on your last success. You have to adapt and wow.
Constantly.
That's a huge life lesson, recognizing that, as you said, things are constantly changing. And so you have to, I would say, elevate your game every single time you're doing it.
Definitely. Yeah. And I would say to Dom, so the other thing that's important is feedback, right? Mm-hmm. So I can do it, I can put out the program that I think is the best program, but it's always important for me to understand how did this impact the persons.
Others.
I remember when I was being certified to deliver a program, professor training that I had to do. One of the things that they said that stood out to me is that many times we design programs, so facilitators or people in training design programs for them.
Mm-hmm.
But it really is for the participants, right?
That is so true.
Yes. So if I feel that, putting this in my PowerPoint or in my session is really good and it serves me, but it doesn't serve others, then
yeah,
I have not succeeded. I'll use that word succeeded, right?
Yeah.
So feedback is important for me. So I'm always curious to find out while I put this on, how did people experience it? How is it transforming their lives? What are they going to do different as a result of having attended a session? And for me, that's the real thing, because I don't just want it to be you came to a session and it felt good. And yeah, I want you to feel comfortable. I want you to share, but I also want you to be able to apply what we teach. And I call it in your life and your leadership. So I feel if you practice it at home, it becomes a lot easier to do in the organization. So feedback is important.
And often people are afraid to get feedback. We now live in a culture where sometimes when you put yourself out there, people overshare their views and their thoughts. And
quite true.
But what you're saying is that feedback can help you grow, and leaning into that is important.
Yes, and I really love that. And I will tell you something that I had to do. So I can say that you're in my young career, I was a bit of a perfectionist. I give my all when I'm putting into something. And it was difficult at first to get feedback because two things would happen. One, I would critique myself and say, well, how could you miss that? How is it you didn't see that? And you spent all this time preparing, right?
Yes.
So it was difficult back then. And then the other thing would be how they could say that, they don't get it, right? They don't understand. Right?
Blood, sweat, and tears.
Exactly. So there was the self-critique, and then there was the how come? But then again, in my journey and my career, I then said, you know what? I want that I am constantly doing my self-awareness and my reflection and evaluating so that I can see. So I don't have to wait for somebody else to give me feedback, right? So I'm doing that piece, that critical assessment and evaluation of myself. And then when the feedback comes, it doesn't feel like ouch. It feels like, oh gosh, this is really a gift, right? And so leading into it, yes. And I think I would say even going after it. So go after, ask persons who you think can give you really objective feedback. And I always say that when you're giving me feedback, tell me, what are the behaviors? Be specific with it because sometimes, we give people feedback, whether it's leaders, on a performance appraisal or 360, and we give people feedback that they can't do anything with because it's vague and they can't, and maybe what you were thinking about is not what they're thinking about. So giving feedback that somebody could really take and put into practice, because that's really the best gift we can give them.
So, as you talk about gifts, I know you've been gifted with 5 daughters.
Yeah.
Which I think is phenomenal. But talk to me about how you have equipped each of them to become leaders in their own spheres and in their own right.
No, great, thank you. Yes, so my girls are a gift, and people always say you had 5 natural births, right? No adoptions, no nothing. And I said they were natural. So again, because I was privileged and blessed, shaped by my mom, right? My girls also had the privilege of my mom and then other grandmother, right? So two
Yeah.
grandparents, right? And so again, strong women poured into them. So the same thing. And I think what was good was the consistency of the values. So just as
Right.
is what I was taught is what I told them, the importance of a name, the importance of being kind to other people, the importance of helping other people.
Yeah.
And they're all different, they're all very different. And then church, right? So what has happened as well is that they also have leadership roles in church and the youth group as well.
Right.
So there's that balance of the guidance, that divine guidance and leadership roles. So I have one daughter, she is responsible for the youth conference, the whole circuit, right? And they do different things. So like two of them in charge of digital ministry, they put on concerts and shows. And if you ask them, they would speak about part of it is modern, Mother's Day just finished, so I had a privilege, the opportunity for them to share what they saw and how they felt. So they said, they would have seen, how I did what I did, and that shaped them, but they're doing it their way,
Yes.
and therefore what I try to be is a coach and a guide, and again, just trying to guide them on this right path, and really, because we live in a world where there's so many influences, and what I would say that's really great is that, so when their friends come across, and, I realize their friends are very similar, and the parents are very similar, so that for me, sort of shows how it has really passed on to them, and they hold on to it, children sometimes will always say, well, Mom, they think they know because they're young, but in their actions and their thinking and what gets them upset and what are the things they stand for and when they speak about injustice, I see it, and others see it.
Influence. Yeah. And are there any experiences that you've had as a woman, as your career has developed, as you've become a more senior leader? Are there any obstacles that you've encountered that you would hope would be different for your girls?
So when I think about that question, I would say the first one obstacle would be my own, and by my own, I would say this. Many times I went through feeling this imposter syndrome,
Right.
self-doubt, lack of confidence. Other people had confidence. I didn't have it, and I would be like, or I might say no, as I said earlier, I might turn down an opportunity, and my husband would have to talk me into it, or friends would say, girl, you need to go for this. So what I like that is very different for my girls is that they have the confidence. So one of my daughters, my second to last daughter, well, so let me say this first. As a child, I was extremely skinny, to the point where I had a time walking with my mom in Independence Square and breeze blew and it pushed me, literally was pushing me down the road, right? If you could imagine that, right? So you can, right? So that, and because people used to tease me, I lacked confidence, right?
Right.
So my second to last daughter, Maddie, everybody says she's the image of me, size, everything. Well, where I lacked confidence, she is overly confident. She doesn't have that. So she'll wear her short pants. I mean, now as she gets older, she just turned 22, she's filling out.
Yeah.
But she's as skinny as I was when I was a child.
Wow.
But so she had that. So I would say that so that's one where I held myself back.
Yeah.
The other thing that I remember in my career was, I remember earlier, this would have been back in my banking days, so I came through Roytech, IBCT. That was a school leaving program, right? So this was a program that helped young people when they were leaving school make that transition to the world of work. And it was a full class, so it was a 1 year program, and you had work and study experience. And then I remember being placed. I was happy. I was the first person to be placed by the bank, because that's how the bank used to recruit people. And then I went into a department, and it was good. But what was interesting was that a couple of times people would tell me, your name came up for promotion, but your manager said you couldn't be released. There were about 5 times that happened, 5 times. I don't even know if the manager ever knew that I found out. But what that did was that, so the first time hearing it, I was disappointed. Second time, third time, I remember my friends who were now employees going to training, and I was like, well, how come they going on training? I'm not going on any training. I'm not being, So that coupled with information being shared, about the fact that, and it was because my manager said, well, no, I'm not releasing her. I can't release her. I need her here, right?
Yeah.
The positive about that, or the opportunity that presented, was a mindset opportunity for me, because what I then said was, okay, that's okay. I will invest in myself and I will send myself to training. So instead of it keeping me down, it actually motivated me and it propelled me, right? And that has been my drive. I said, you know what? I won't ever wait for an organization to invest in me. I will do it for myself. And that propelled me, and that was actually how I approached things after that. So yes, that was one, and that was pretty young in my career.
Yeah.
But again, it shaped the drive that I have, and it shaped how I see things, and it changed a mindset that otherwise could have kept me back.
Yeah. Wow. And how do you, I know you do a lot in your community. How do you ensure that the life experiences that you've gained are transferred, to the next generation? Other than like your daughters, how do you do that in the community?
Sure. So, one way is that what's important to me. So I give a lot of my time in terms of training and development and coaching and who am I programs and leadership programs. I do that for the church, right? So I've done it in the past. Again, prior to transitioning to consultancy,
Yeah.
I would do it sporadically. In this new dispensation, more than ever, I'm doing a lot more of that.
Okay.
I also do a workshop, a Who Am I workshop, on a program called Life, right? It's a program for females at Massy stores, right? And so we spend a lot of time, and for many years I did that program for free. It was part of Give It Back. Other than that, with children's friends or anything, like I volunteer to do, to assist anytime I can. People would tell me, "Good, listen, this person that I think I'd like for you to talk to, to
coach or to
coach and to support. And sometimes, many times people would say, well, I don't, the person can't pay or whatever, but that's not it for me. The bigger thing is about helping people navigate a difficult time now. And it's male or female, it doesn't matter. I've given my time for programs like that. There was a program that the fire services had that they did in conjunction with Massey Motors ACL, and one of the leaders there that was very passionate about giving back. It was for young men. So I said, Audra, would you help us shape the program for them? Because this would help. So any opportunity that's like that, where I have an opportunity to share in it, because if people relate to stories. Right. So I'm not going to stand up and give them this whole theory. There has to be, yes, there is some theory, because it's guided by
grounded in something. Yeah.
it's grounded in something, but it really is about the stories and hearing others tell their stories and us sharing our stories, and then people can relate it. And therefore they walk away and they tell you they walked away with something that maybe they felt so frustrated or confined by a situation that they didn't think that there was a way out. But through a conversation, I mean, as recent as last week, I was talking to a pharmacist right here in Santa Cruz. And we were talking, and at the end of it, she said, I ended up sharing so much more. And I know I don't really know you, but she said, you know what, but I'm leaving feeling inspired. And that means the world to me, because there's such a feeling of hopelessness and anxiety and so much depression, that anybody, it could be somebody I'm in a line with and I have a conversation with,
in the bank.
in the bank, right? Or buying food from the savannah or something. So that's how I do it. So sometimes it's not confined to a program or to a thing, but it could just a casual conversation with somebody.
Yeah. And you talked about this new role. So you are currently with your husband running your own consultancy.
Yes.
What's the legacy that you're building by doing that? I mean, I know this from my own experience, it takes a lot to set up your own business and run it in a way that you wanted to see other organizations
Yes.
hold you as an
Yes.
employee.
Yes.
So what's the legacy that you're building, Audra? Like, I'm really excited for you on this part of your journey.
Yeah, so firstly, it's one of family business because the intention
Right.
is that the girls with their different skills kind of come in and continue doing this, right?
Right.
But at the heart of it, so the name of the company is awesome, AWSOM, logo Angel Wings, so there's a divine purpose towards it.
Right.
And as I see this next phase as a continuation of what I've been doing before in organizations, right?
Yeah.
Because I've been privileged that even in my companies, even when I'm doing training, it has been my way. So if I'm designing programs, I've been given the space to design it in a way for me that has that divine guidance and it's impactful. So the legacy that we really want is to just ignite people to achieve their greatest potential and in so doing help organizations succeed. So it has to be about creating long lasting impact. And that's it. Now, what is interesting is that for the last 4 years at Massey, I had the opportunity to form the Learning Institute. Again, that was a dream, right? It was a dream of mine, supported very much by the company. So that's why I'm saying that, doing it for Massey and then transitioning now, because this was always the goal. My husband and I had always planned that at some point in time that we would both set this up for our company. And God in his goodness gave me 4 years, 5 years to practice
Yeah.
and run it in Massey, right?
Yeah.
And when I tell you, Dominique, that I marvel at that all the time because I remember when my husband spoke about it at the beginning, I was like, well, I don't know anything about running a business. I would never run a business. I could facilitate. I could do HR. So you do that piece.
Yeah.
And God looked down and smiled because he knew what you had in store, right?
Yeah.
So really, the legacy is to do the same thing, whether it's an individual, because people have asked me, is it just for companies? I said, no, it's for individuals, organizations, anybody that our programs can impact and can change lives. That's what we want.
Wow. I am curious. Flexibility for you as a woman in leadership must have been a challenge.
Yes.
But every time I have interacted with you, you are always calm, peaceful, unflustered. How have you done that? How have you married, being a wife, being a mother, and being a woman in leadership?
So I'm honored that your experience with me was unflustered. And my family would probably tell you at times, no. So work-life balance and really doing it, it was something that I actually didn't do a very good job at, to be honest. So the thing with me is that when I'm doing something, I give my 100%. And if I was to think about a scale, there were many times where the demands of work really pulled me. And I even remember that with my third daughter, Brianna, around the time when she had SE, I was in an HR director role. And I can say that I realized that I didn't do a good job of handling that. Demands of job.
Yeah.
Precedent. I was there, I was dropping other lessons. I was doing those things, but I always felt that I could have done better.
Right.
And therefore, because there were two girls after her, that's how I adjusted. Now, what I'd also had for a long time was the support of my mom, because by then my mom had retired and she would step in and support. My husband would support. Other grandparents would support,
Yeah.
Balancing it, I didn't always do a good job. And therefore, I then moved to saying, you know what, maybe it's not balance, but it's how do I integrate? So I stopped thinking about balance and started thinking about how do I integrate to do better, to show up in a way. And also what happened was that, so the family knew. So in my role, I had a lot of travel. And if I wasn't traveling, then my husband was traveling. So we had to work out a structure and a process to deal with that as well. And I would also say, Dominique, I remember around 2012 making a decision. I was at a director's level. I remember one day waking up and saying, well, I'm a director. So what? And I was feeling a little burnt out. And then I remember telling my husband that, you know what I will do? I will sort of step back. And I made a decision that because I was on this momentum and I was, going up the organization and I decided that let me step back and pour more into the family. So therefore he would be the one that would go forward because he also was more senior than me career-wise, right? And I made that decision. And the interesting thing with that was that then when a vacancy came up for which I was a natural consideration, people even, I remember being told someone, an executive even thought, well, how come she didn't throw a hat in the ring for that? Is it that she's not ambitious? And a colleague at that level had to tell them, no, it's not that. She's just made a choice in terms of where her focus is. So I reprioritized, I refocused. I did take a step back very intentionally to gain some of that balance and to show up differently. And then after that, I went back into, okay, I'm now back on a path, like
Even keel.
on an even keel and with flexibility, as you said, being a critical thing. And I would say to you, Dom, even as you mentioned flexibility, so even the transition to now, that's one of the things that's key for me. Having flexibility. So while it's my own business and, yes, we have to, I'm now responsible, my husband's now responsible for the income that comes in. It is on my terms, on our terms, and we're choosing how we do it.
Right. Wow. That's really great. And I guess my last question for you. If you had to tell little Audra,
Right.
all those years ago, really, really shy, if you had to give Audra any advice, what would you say and why?
So I would tell myself, believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. I think I spent so much time doubting and worrying about whether I was good enough or not good enough, while everybody around was saying, "But you're good enough." We don't get why you're not saying you're not good enough. You know, I would tell little Audra, you put on this earth for a purpose. God has gifted you. He's given you everything that you need is inside of you. Just believe in yourself and don't be afraid to seek help because that's the other thing too. I've always been fiercely independent and something I had to learn was the importance of, you don't have to do everything yourself. Lean on other people, just identify who it is you have to lean on and tap into that. So that's what I would tell little Audra. One, you're good enough. You've got what it takes and also, lean into others. I learned that eventually, a lot later, but I think it might have saved me some grief.
I think, yeah.
Some grief, yeah.
Because when I listen to you talk about, the support system that you had with your girls, we always talk about it takes a village. And it sounds like you had an amazing village, but you were really hard on yourself.
I was.
And so hearing you say that and being mindful of something else you shared earlier about how so many people are experiencing, that feeling of depression or anxiety, this space creates that village. So for those people who may not know you, but who could relate to your experiences and relate to your journey, it's really helpful that they can see that what's possible. And I would tell them, because you wouldn't say that about yourself, but I would tell them that you make it look effortless when you do it.
Oh, good. Thank you. And thanks for that, and again, I just want to reinforce, Dom, even you see prayer and faith, it is at the center of who I am and what drives me. And I kid you not, I have conversations with God. So with MLI, I remember when I was established at, as I said, I've never had a business, never saw myself as doing a startup business, especially in a company. And I literally said, God, I don't know what to do. And I kid you not, as I said that, people would I would get a WhatsApp. I'd say that in the morning by the afternoon. Hi, Audra. Heard you doing this. This is great. I'm here to help, Tell me what you need,
Wow.
So I also cannot, and I don't want to miss taking this opportunity to also say, and I'm not, my faith and God's guidance has been critical to my leadership, and I wouldn't do it any other way. It's what I've been able to lean on, and He sends the help, He sends the village, He sends the opportunities, and I live it every day. It doesn't mean that, leadership is challenging, especially now with the global issues and the geopolitics and all the things coming down the pipeline, but that's also what centers me. And that's the place I go to, and so that's that's an important part of my toolkit.
Of your toolkit, yeah.
Yes.
And I think when you said earlier that, when God gives you purpose, and it's clear that your purpose, one of the things that your purpose with is just lifting others up and helping people just become the best versions of themselves. So I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for all that you give and all that you do.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. And I'm privileged to have people like yourself and many others, that village, the confidence, the support, a sisterhood.
Yes.
And I think that's, as we talk about being rooted in Caribbean, I think it's one of the things that we love, right? Because we're in the Caribbean, it's so familiar and it's like, she's like your neighbor, this sort of feeling that you get with people, because we look out for each other,
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for making the time to do this and for sharing from your heart. I really appreciate that.
Thank you so very much. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I really hope that, our session today, as with all the other sessions, will give somebody a little bit of hope and encouragement and inspiration.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.